Okay. We are ready.
Thank you. Welcome to the February 5, 2026 meeting of the Public Safety and Sanitation Committee. I'm Stuart Desser, Chair of the committee. Tonight, we're joined by Community Coordinator Brian Lafferty. This meeting is called to order at 18:35. Committee members attending remotely, you're reminded you have to keep your cameras on and the first and last names displayed during the meeting. Members of the community who are not on board are free to raise questions or comments through the Zoom Q&A. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand either in person or the yellow cartoon one on Zoom, and we'll recognize you when we can. Does anyone want to take minutes? Really? Excellent.
I'll do it.
Super. What's next? Brian, would you take attendance, please?
Thanks, Stu. Yes, of course. Committee members, I'll call your name. When your name is called, please say present. I'll announce that there is four. Stu Desser.
Present.
Thank you. Justin Goldberg. I think we are waiting for Justin. Gloria Hayes.
Present.
Thank you. Rupo Kakar.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra Leftoff. Look, let's see you. Thank you. Kevin O'Keefe. I think he was joining us virtually.
Did he RSVP?
Yes. Ann Sullivan.
Present.
Thank you. Justin Goldberg. Thank you.
Perfect timing.
With 6 of 7 members, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight's agenda is on the screen. We'll adopt it if there's no objection. If you have any objection, speak now. Seeing no objections, the agenda is adopted. The minutes from the January 7, 2026 meeting were distributed to you. If there's no objection, we'll adopt those minutes. Many members, please speak up if you have any corrections or adjustments. Seeing no objection and adjustments, the minutes are adopted. Committee members know the rules. As usual, without objection, we'll suspend the rule requiring that you be recognized before you speak, because you know it doesn't matter anyway. So we have one member so far who is remote. We should have another, and the rest of us here are present. The presentation tonight is by the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. We welcome Jahai Rose, CCRB's Director of Public Engagement and Partnerships. Do you want us to wait until you're finished with your presentation before we ask questions, or can we interrupt you with at least small ones? Jahai.
So you could feel free before the end of one slide to, if you need it, if you have any clarity you want on that slide, to interrupt me.
Okay.
Before I go to the next one.
It'll happen. Please go ahead.
Okay.
You're on.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. As mentioned, my name is Jahai Rose. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Public Engagement and Partnerships at the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Bear with me for one moment while I share my screen. And I just want to provide some information regarding the Civilian Complaint Review Board. Okay, I just wanted to verify that you can see my slides.
Got it. Yep.
Hey, wonderful. So as you may already know, the Civilian Complaint Review Board is a city agency. We're separate from the New York City Police Department. Our responsibility is to investigate, mediate, and in some cases, administratively prosecute allegations of misconduct that are alleged against members of the New York City Police Department. Our agency is entirely staffed of civilians, just meaning no officers work for the Civilian Complaint Review Board. We're primarily staffed with investigators and attorneys. The CCRB has a board. That board is comprised of members that are appointed by the electorate. So the New York City mayor can appoint 5 members to the board. New York City Council can appoint 5 members to the board. Each one of those members has to reside in a different borough to ensure that all 5 boroughs have representation regarding the conversation about police accountability. The New York City Police Commissioner can designate 3 members to the board. Those 3 members to the board are the only members that are allowed to have pre-existing law enforcement experience. So charter dictates that these are the only individuals that could have pre-existing law enforcement experience. So they're normally retired law enforcement. The public advocate can appoint 1 member to the board, and the chair is jointly appointed by the city council and the mayor. So
Cool.
typically when we do these presentations, we get into the weeds of what the role of the NYPD is. So that includes maintaining order, serving and protecting, rendering aid, and enforcing the law. In order for police officers to do this job appropriately, they must follow what's called the NYPD Patrol Guide. The NYPD Patrol Guide is comprised of laws, best practices, city, state, and federal regulations that kind of govern what policing is in the city of New York and how to do it in a way that's constitutional. Only reason why this is very, very, very important is because this is what the CCRB uses to determine misconduct. So we don't use what's popular by the public, what they believe is wrong, what they believe is not wrong. The CCRB uses the NYPD's document to determine if an officer engaged in misconduct or not. So if they did follow the patrol guide, it's not considered misconduct. If they did not follow the patrol guide, then it is considered misconduct.
1 second, go ahead.
Yeah, is it Jahai? Is that right?
Yes.
So just quickly, like, what prompted the creation of this board? I was reading a little bit about it, but I just wanted to kind of hear about kind of what its mission was or how that came to be.
So the CCRB was created because of an outcry, because of a protest that took place in Thompson Square Park. That during the time, I believe Mayor Koch was the mayor. And well, I believe it was right before Mayor Koch, to be honest. There was a riot that the police commissioner literally called it a police riot. And as a part of that, a lot of complaints went to the Civilian Complaint Review Board at the time, which was actually a part of the New York City Police Department. And they said minimum to no police officers received any type of discipline or punishment. So as a result, the city council said, we need to move forward with the Lindsay plan. The Mayor Lindsay said, we need to develop a CCRB that is independent and separate from the NYPD so that these complaints that are received are not hampered. And as we know, the NYPD, because you run into the line of fire with someone, that person is responsible for watching your back. You may feel a little difficult holding that officer accountable for misconduct. The accusation comes from members of the public. So to avoid that and create a sense of true accountability, they then created the CCRB to be 100% civilian. And that was signed into legislation by David Dinkins.
Thank you.
No problem. So the CCRB can intake all complaints about misconduct, but we can only investigate very specific types of misconduct. That includes force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. So where it comes to force, we're investigating for if force was excessive and or unnecessary. So if a police officer used force and the patrol guy didn't require it, it's unnecessary. If a police officer used force but then went too far, that's considered excessive. Also, abuse of authority is where a police officer may then misrepresent their authority. Normally, this happens to gain someone's compliance. So engaging in stop and frisk encounters without any type of justifiable reasoning, covering their name and badge to avoid being identified if someone wants to file a complaint, and things like calling into question someone's immigration status or threatening to call ICE on someone that they believe may be undocumented. CCB also investigates discourtesy, so if members of the police department are being rude to members of the public, and if officers utilize offensive language, which is any language that inappropriately refers to someone's race, religion, gender expression, gender ID, sexual orientation, or disability.
Can I ask about the offensive language? How's that defined?
So typically racial slurs, misgendering, typically whatever's at the moment, like, the changes in what's considered offensive are very vast. So what we would do would align that with whatever current colloquialisms may be used and how they were used in the context of the officer using those terminologies. So it definitely is the point shifts depending on the time frame and how the officer used or whatever language they used.
Thank you.
No problem. The CCRB also explains to members of the public about the Right to Know Act, and that's because we investigate it. So we investigate the Right to Know Act is a law that went into place in 2018, and that law then dictates that a police officer must do specific things when they interact with members of the public. That includes officers identifying themselves, ensuring that they explain to the person why they're being stopped, as long as that explanation doesn't create further harm for the police officer. And the officer is supposed to also explain to that person if they have to request to search that person. That means that they're now engaging in a consent search. That officer is supposed to tell that person they have the right to say no if they ask them for permission to do the search. Officers also now, as of 2018, are supposed to offer a business card in the event they either are accusing someone of a crime, if they're asking accusatory questions, which would be considered level 2 and level 3 encounters, that police officer before the end of the encounter is supposed to offer a business card. Now, if the person gets arrested, then that requirement goes off the table. Or if the person gets like a ticket, then that requirement goes off the table because now it's leveled up to a level 4 interaction. So for level 2s and level 3s, that officer is supposed to offer a business card. The civilian shouldn't need to ask for it. But in all cases, the civilian can ask for that business card. The nature of the Right to Know Act includes that the person should have a way to identify the officer after the encounter. So it shouldn't be left up to that person's memory as to who that officer was when they engaged them. So if the officer provides that information on a blank card or on a piece of paper, or gives the person the opportunity to write that information down off of the officer's clothing, then they will be able to also fulfill the requirement of the Right to Know Act when it comes to offering the business card.
In just a few seconds, can you summarize the DeBoer levels for us?
So for the 4 levels, level 1 is when the officer's at making general inquiries. So I'm gonna use the example of someone going missing, right? So level 1, the person is missing. They don't think you're involved in it. They're asking you, have you seen this person? That's level 1. Level 2 is where they now may believe you had something to do with this person's disappearance. So now they're asking you questions that may be more accusatory. Someone saying you were the last person with them, someone saying that the last time they saw them, they were in your presence, someone saying that they know who that you may know where this person is. That's level 2. Level 3 is a direct accusation. Someone is saying you have this person. There's reason to believe you are the reason why this person went missing. And then level 4 is you're now being arrested because of that suspicion or being given a ticket or summons because of that suspicion. And that's considered the enforcement level.
Okay, and in levels 2 and 3, you're not free to leave, is that correct?
Level 3, you're not free to leave. If the questions are just accusatory, the officer may have some suspicion but doesn't have enough to be able to hold you, then that's when it rises to level 2. Level 3, you can't leave. They believe that it's you. There's no question asked. You're the person that they believe is the person that committed this crime. And as of that, they now need to ask more questions in order for them to verify that you are the person that they're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's various ways to contact the CCRB. We try to remain accessible as possible. We could be contacted by phone, coming to our office in Lower Manhattan at 100 Church Street. You can contact us online by using our website or going on social media to send us a direct message. We could also be contacted by snail mail, so by sending a letter to the agency, and we could also access to our complaints can also be found at local police precincts. Any police precinct or all police precincts in the city of New York are supposed to accept CCRB complaints. They could accept them themselves, or they could give people a form that they could fill out and send to our agency so they could file the complaint. Either way, we would receive the complaint. If folks don't feel comfortable leaving the complaint with the desk sergeant, then they could just ask for a self-addressed envelope and a form, put that complaint inside that self-addressed envelope, no post is necessary, and it'll be sent straight to our agency and we'll respond from the information in the form.
But but like likely that's if you file something anonymously, so nothing can be followed up with in an investigative way, that's not gonna go anywhere, right?
So if it can't be followed up in an investigative way in the sense of we can't identify the officer, then the civilian would.
Or the complainant, right?
Right. So we do have situations where complainants say one thing at one point, and then after the complaint process starts, they then quit. Those are considered truncations. But if they file the complaint initially, our immediate follow-up would be to, one, verify that it falls within our jurisdiction, two, verify that the action falls within our jurisdiction, that the officer or person falls within our jurisdiction. If those two things are not lined up, then we would just notify them that this is out of our jurisdiction. Let's say it falls back to the police department, or let's say they were complaining about park police, we then would do a soft transfer. So it will go over to the agency that can investigate it, and they will then work with them going forward to investigate the complaint. So just because someone files a complaint with us doesn't always mean that we can investigate it. But if we can, we will. And if we can't, but it is about someone in law enforcement, then we will transfer it to who can investigate it.
But I mean, if it's an anonymous complaint, like, how do you investigate, right?
So that depends to the extent that it's anonymous. So someone could submit like an anonymous complaint to us, but then it's widely known what happened, right? So let's say someone submits a complaint to us, but we see the complaint on social media, the complaint came up in the news, then we might have enough information to go forward with the complaint if the location was identifiable, the officer was identifiable, and the actions of the officer might have been identifiable online. But without any information, including the person's information, then yes, we wouldn't be able to do anything with that complaint. I hope that answered the question.
Totally, thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So when it comes to the CCRB, anybody can file. So we don't ask people about immigration status. We don't ask them if they're residents of the city of New York. They could see misconduct, jump on a plane and leave and go to a whole nother country. That doesn't matter to us. If the complaint is about a New York City police officer, with actions that took place in the city of New York, the CCRB can investigate it. Connecting with that person after they've probably vacated the city or they could even have been incarcerated after that would be our responsibility to then get in contact with them to collect any details that they may hold as a witness to whatever the interaction was or from their own personal experience. But we don't necessarily concern ourselves with where people live. Was the officer a New York City police officer? Did it happen within the 5 boroughs? And then we'll go forward with completing that complaint in any way that we can. The complaint process, as previously mentioned regarding intake, we're pretty much taking the full story. As we take the full story, we're then verifying, hey, is this a police officer, sworn member of service? Which means we don't take complaints about school safety officers, CUNY, New York City police, New York City hospital police. If they're not a sworn member of service, even though they wear a badge, even though they may have a gun, we don't take them. So MTA police, we don't take those complaints. If they're a New York City sworn member of service, police officer, and if the complaint was about force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. Once those 2 things lined up, then we would have the ability to intake the complaint. Once that complaint is intaken, then we will have the ability to assign it to an investigator. That investigator has 2 jobs. One, they have to get a full story about what happened in the interaction, and then they have to determine if that full story allows us to be able to offer them mediation or not. If a case is mediation eligible, then it'll be offered to the civilian and the police officer. Both parties have to agree. You do not want to do a mediation where one person wants to do it and the other person is resistant. If both parties are in agreement, then we will go forward with the mediation. And the mediation just puts both parties into the same room. It could even be a virtual room like this, and they let them talk about it. There's an impartial mediator that does not work for the CCRB, does not work for the NYPD. We contract out, and they help facilitate the conversation just to make sure that both parties understand what the other party is saying, and there's no domination of the conversation. During that mediation, in the event the civilian is satisfied with the mediation, then the complaint essentially goes away. That complaint does not end up on the police officer's personnel record, and we do not go forward with an investigation. If they're satisfied in mediation, then we're satisfied in mediation. If that mediation doesn't go well, which means the civilian is not satisfied with mediation, then the CCRB goes forward with our investigatory process. Our boilerplate responsibility is to investigate complaints. Now, in the event during the course of the investigation, the civilian then says, hey, I need other assistance, like I was traumatized by the interaction, or I have issues with childcare, or I need other reference services, then we will offer them what we call our civilian assistance unit. These are like social workers that work for the agency that could provide them resources that are not specifically related to the case. They only get access to this service while they have an active case with the CCRB. Once their case is over, essentially their access to these referrals then end as well.
Let me just ask about mediation. I think I saw that something like 20% of your cases are eligible and 13% of that 20% actually accept mediation. So we're talking about 2.53% of all cases actually go to mediation. Mediation obviously would be a good thing. I mean, especially if the police officer would satisfy the complainant.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about what, I guess it's both parties have to agree to the mediation. How often does that happen, where the complainant is happy, but the police officer won't, for instance? And out of the mediations you do, how many actually resolve the case?
So we have about 65. So it changes year to year. So the numbers that I gave in the presentation are pertaining to last year. Years prior, we had way more people that actually accepted mediation. But there's also been a larger number of enforcement in 2025. So I think when you run into civilians, and this is just most likely just speculation on my part, when you have civilians that at this point have interactions with police officers that they feel are um, more so intentional, more so than being like, hey, this just so happened to have happened, then those individuals may likely refuse mediation. So this case, you have 96% of officers saying, yes, I want to do it. And then that 20% that you see that said they did, the 36%, they're just saying, I just don't want to do it. In 65% of mediations, it was successful, which means that the civilian said, I'm satisfied with this mediation, no need to do an investigation. That number this year is just extremely low because of the low number of investigations that actually were conducted. And it was only 54 mediations that were conducted for the entire year, and only 35 of them were conducted successfully.
But yeah, I kind of had a question about that too, both kind of why are the numbers so low on the mediation? Because like sometimes an honest apology will go a long way, you know? But also kind of which party is it that is typically sort of not amenable to it?
So
Is it the complainant or is it the officer?
So as of this year, it's the officers seem to be more willing to engage in the mediation, but in every situation, the mediation is determined by the civilian. If the civilian says that this mediation did not go well, then it did not go well, and they're not satisfied, then we must go forward with an investigation. The police officer really has no say. It's if the civilian is
Yeah, but I
happy.
mean, like, kind of getting to the mediation,
Yeah,
like who's saying, like, before anybody steps foot in a room, virtual or otherwise, when it's being offered in 20%, but it's being accepted in fewer.
yes, and that's by the
But,
civilian.
but it's the civilian
It's
who's
just,
like,
yeah, yeah. The police officers in our records have accepted mediation 96% of the time. And I think the police officer has more reason to say yes,
for
because if they
sure.
could convince the civilian that, an apology will help, then the complaint essentially does not go on their permanent record. So it's like a complaint never existed. So that's their incentive to say yes and be sincere in the conversation. For the civilian, there really is no incentive opposed to just having a discussion that they think is going to be helpful for their relationship with the officer.
Is that an increased number, like it's in the last, I don't know, dozen years, like has there been
What's the
more?
trend?
Yeah, has there been more, what's what I'm looking for, like more, desire to engage on the police side, or is that kind of been consistent historically?
Police officers always want to do the mediation more than the civilians do. Most police officers want the opportunity to then take that complaint off of their record. So it's normally where police officers on a higher level are saying, yes, we want to do mediation.
And just to be clear, no one's bringing an attorney to the mediation, and anything discussed at the mediation cannot be used. If the mediation fails, it cannot be used in the adjudication
Okay.
that follows.
Correct. Yeah, it's completely confidential. Investigators are not allowed into that room. Like you said, attorneys are not allowed into that room. BBA reps are not allowed into that room. That conversation is just between those two individuals and the independent mediator. Our staff is not really even allowed inside that room. We just offer a space for them to do these things and then leave them to their devices.
Okay, please continue.
So once we know that we're going to go forward with an investigation, the process is to collect evidence. So we have subpoena power. So essentially anything related to the case, we do have the ability to make an aggressive request for it through our subpoena power. But the first things we're going to be looking for is to have a full conversation with the civilian, have a conversation with the police officer or officers that may have been involved. Any witnesses that are willing to have a conversation with us, we will definitely have a conversation with them, interview them, and then we would start collecting other types of evidence, video evidence, body worn camera footage, memo logbooks, 911 radio runs, anything that gives us a full scope of what the conversation was, what actually took place in the interaction, we want to get our hands on. And that's for us to be able to find the truth of the matter. So our responsibility is to find the truth of what happened. Then we would dictate if the officer did what they're being accused of or not. And then we would then have to determine if the officer's actions that they actually took were in alignment with the patrol guide or not in alignment with the patrol guide. So the investigator, in doing that, makes a recommendation. I believe the officer, let's say, did what they're being accused of, and it was in fact misconduct. Now, I just want to bring a caveat that will make the numbers that I'm going to show later on a little bit more understandable. The CCRB divides, kind of like the district attorney, they will take a singular complaint and then divide it into allegations that we could actually investigate. So I could have one complaint, but it have two, three, four, maybe even 10 different allegations based off of what the CCRB can investigate. So even though the investigator may then say, this officer did this, use, let's say, force that they weren't supposed to. The officer did have a justifiable reason for stopping the individual. So the abuse of authority based off of the stop may not be substantiated. However, the use of force may have been substantiated. So that's pretty much how the investigations process goes in the sense of the recommendations that they give to the board. This is what I think. This is what the officer did or didn't do, and it was or wasn't misconduct. Then that recommendation goes to a three-panel board. The three-panel board is selected to ensure that there's fairness. So there's one person selected from the full 15-member board that I mentioned. One of them may be from the city council's designees, one would be from the mayoral designees, another would be from the NYPD's designee. They could then say one from the public advocate, one from the city council, one from the police department. But nonetheless, it's divided so that there isn't a massive amount of one type of designee in the room dominating the conversation. If they can't make a determination in that three-panel board, then it goes to the full board for it to be reviewed. Just to lay out, I'm sorry.
The panel board, though, it can never be two people from, for instance, the police or the mayor's office.
Correct.
It's always one from each. Okay.
Yeah, it has to be one from each. If they so that's normally what the delays happen when the delays happen. Because if we let's say we can't find an avail because these are not paid members of the CCRB, they are volunteers, right? Like community board members, right? They're volunteers. So in that, if they're doing their paid job and they're not available for a panel, then we just have to wait until those three things line up. One from the mayor, one from the city council, one from the police commissioner. They can't just mix them together just for the sake of expediency. So just to lay out what the terminologies that we use are to determine the outcomes of the investigations, I just wanted to lay this out. Substantiated means, in a nutshell, the officer did what they're being accused of and it was misconduct. Unable to determine just means that we didn't reach the burden of proof to be able to determine if misconduct did or did not occur. So we just say we're not certain. Unfounded means that we had enough evidence to be able to determine that the incident itself did not occur the way it was explained to the CCRB. So therefore, misconduct could not have occurred because what's being alleged is not what occurred. And then we have within department guidelines. We don't expect every person to walk around with a NYPD patrol guide. That being the case, sometimes people may misinterpret the level of discretion officers can use, or they may misrepresent, or they may not know if an officer did have justifiable cause to, let's say, stop their car, stop them while they're walking, but they still may make a complaint to the CCRB. So in so doing, the CCRB, in all fairness, will then make it clear to the person that the actions that the officer took, even though everything you said to us was accurate, the officer did not, in fact, engage in misconduct. Their conduct fell in alignment with the NYPD's patrol guide. So those are the four general outcomes for complaints that are fully investigated or investigated through the CCRB. The only other outcome that's not listed here that does happen sometimes is if we're unable to identify an officer, that gets its own designation, and that's just officer unidentified. Another outcome could be that that is truncated, and that just means that the civilian, even though they wanted to start the complaint process at one point, they then said, I don't want to do this anymore, and then they drop the complaint, or they tell us to drop the complaint. So once the complaint is completed, if it is deemed substantiated, and the CCRB recommends the highest level of discipline, which would be charges and specifications, then that case goes to the APU, the Administrative Prosecutions Unit. That's where our lawyers get involved. So the attorneys then take the evidence from the trial, they take the determination from the CCRB, and then they go and make the strongest argument that the officer did what they're being accused of, that conduct was misconduct, and that the officer needs to be punished or disciplined the way that the CCRB said that they need, the CCRB's board said that they need to be disciplined. These cases are adjudicated at one police plaza at NYPD headquarters, and these do not impact or have anything to do with like a criminal prosecution nor civil suits. So we don't have anything to do with people getting a pot of money at the end of this rainbow, and we don't have anything to do with police officers going to jail with these interactions. One of our more popular cases of the APU would be Daniel Pantaleo, the detective that put Eric Gardner in a fatal chokehold. As amidst of all of this, when all these cases are investigated, it goes to our policy department. Our policy department then writes up reports. So we have boilerplate reports that we write up every year. Those are monthly statistical reports, just telling the story, right? Just reporting the news. Semi-annual, telling the news for 6 months. And then we have our annual report, which tells the news for the whole year prior. During that time period, we're just giving information, not necessarily making recommendations for change in police policy, just showing how we handled the cases that came into our office and what cases came into our office. The CCRB oftentimes, or sometimes, also does issue-based reports. Some of those issue-based reports that are a little bit more popular include the 2020 protest report, the report on youth and policing, and then the report that laid out the use of the body-worn camera program on CCRB investigations. In these specific reports, this is where the CCRB analyzes information and data for a very specific time, and then we're giving recommendations as to how whatever that condition is can be improved to either improve policing or improve police oversight.
And I just want to mention for people who are attending who are not on the board, and I see a number of them, that you call it a monthly statistical report. It's actually pretty interesting. You get past the numbers and you synopsize an example of each of the 5 different dispositions for the case. So you have a synopsis for a founded claim, one where the officer acted within guidelines and so on. And so each of those synopses actually does reveal a lot of the work that you do. So that they're pretty good. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, are you finished?
I am.
Okay, because I felt that way too, like I went through the January monthly report, which was, I don't know, I suspect it always does, but it covers the full year. I mean, in this case, it was January, so it covered the full year for the last year and the full year for 24. I have to say, I was reading it as a PDF, so it was on my computer. I didn't print it out. And I feel like one of the mission goals is to like educate and communicate effectively. And it sort of said to like, let us know what we can do to communicate effectively. And I felt like honestly, some of the figures seemed so similar to, like figure 14, isn't that the same as like figure 12? And I was like flipping back and forth. And so I did find it super interesting, as Stu said, and I felt like I learned a lot. There's a lot in there, but sometimes less is more. So I might just, for somebody who looks at them every year or every month, who's not in the same position I am, maybe that's not the case, but just thought I would share that.
Completely understood. Now, I'll definitely take that feedback back to our policy department.
Question. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, what was it, administrative prosecution, something?
Yes.
After they're, like, let's say they're deemed that they did something wrong, right? And then it gets passed on and you said lawyers get involved and that's when it happens. What is the purpose of it? Because it's not criminal, it's not civil. Is it just this is how a complaint ends up on their file? Or like, can you just go tell a little bit more about what does that part do?
Understood. So if the complaint goes above a certain amount of discipline, then typically the union gets involved. And what would happen before the APU was that the department advocate would be the one that would prosecute the officer because of the degree in which they're being punished, right? Or they're being disciplined. So anything above 10 vacation days, the New York City Police Department itself, their lawyers, would then go and say, you violated our rules, right? Because you violated our rules, we want to take these 11 days all the way up to suspension or termination from you. That's when the union would then say, our lawyers are going to come in and defend our civilian. We found this process, or the CCRB found this process to be, it's kind of like your brother fighting your brother over a punishment your mom handed down. So the notion was like separate the two processes. If the CCRB conducted the investigation and we were the ones that have all the evidence and we're the ones that made the determination for the discipline, take the NYPD back away from the defending itself and let the CCRB defend its own judgment. And then that was our ability to be able to have a little bit more aggression regarding convincing the NYPD to agree with the outcome, our desired outcome, which would be this is what the officer did, this is why it was misconduct, and this is how they should be disciplined. So that's just to make sure we added a level of advocacy after the case was fully investigated.
So given all of that, how many actual percentage of cases is anyone ever really disciplined?
So what we call that is the concurrence rate. So those numbers are here. The concurrence rate is 84%. So in cases where it involves the APU, the number is about 50 or so, 50 or 50, 55%. And in cases where it's non-APU, it's much higher because the discipline is lower. So the unions would normally say, it's all right. It's only 3 days on your jacket. So in 84% of the times, the CCRB and the commissioner agree that misconduct occurred and this is how the civilian needs to be disciplined. I hope that answered your question. And that's for fully investigated cases. So this only goes for, so if you look at, there's two different places for you to look regarding complaint numbers. There's complaints that come in, that's a way higher number. That's the 5,500 that comes in every year. The CCRB has a very small staff, so we don't investigate 5,000 cases in one year ever. So in last year, we investigated 2,074 cases. So of those 2,074 cases that were investigated, it was 84% of the time where we had concurrence with the New York City Police Commissioner.
Happy concurrence?
Yeah. Whenever it's concurrence, we're on the same page.
Concurrence.
I guess it's happy for us. I don't know about the officer, but I'm pretty certain it's happy for us.
For the officer, of course.
And then
I
for-
guess that's small,
Although
could be,
sometimes,
right?
yes, I
if
think
it's small.
sometimes when you have an employee that is not great, but they're in a union as a boss, you kind of are glad to have them get whacked by somebody else that they might pay attention
Behave a little
to.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the overall goal is to ensure that police officers are in fact following the patrol guide. So, we don't, which is the reason why that is the thing that adds fairness, right? We're not saying the public is upset, therefore we're upset. When it comes to a substantiation, there's pointed, this is the part of the patrol guide that you did not comply with. This is the part that you did not comply with. And then not every recommended discipline is necessarily a punishment. It's, you need to be retrained. You need to have a strong conversation with your commanding officer. It's only when it raises to the level, of the APU is when now you're getting into something more punitive than it's training. And it's all corrective, but that's when you get into the point where you get command discipline A, command discipline B, and then charges. And that happens, less of the time. Oftentimes, sometimes, a lot of times it becomes you need to be retrained or you need to have a discussion with your commanding officer. Yes.
So one of the things I noticed is that the majority of dispositions, and I think this was 2025 total, are either within guidelines or unfounded. And I feel like if I was making a complaint, that would kind of feel like the same thing. And I wonder that I did not write down the figure, what page that came from, sorry. But it was before figure 30. But it just seems like if you've made a complaint and they come back and they say, well, it's either unfounded or, it's within the guidelines, like the cops are allowed to do that.
Mhm.
Those are gonna feel like the same thing to a civilian making that complaint, so, and it's more than half of them.
Understood. So I think the only space where so I think in if we think about the civilian, then we then also have to think about the police officer, right? That's just to make sure that we stay as balanced as possible. I think the separation between unfounded and department guidelines is then it lets the civilian know that either the thing didn't happen or what the officer did was okay. So if what the officer did was okay, then yeah, next time you know that this officer does the exact same thing next time, it will also again be within department guidelines because they are actually allowed to do that. If it's unfounded, we have no evidence that it happened. We have evidence that it didn't happen at all. So that's the only difference between the two. As long as you understand what they are, then you'll understand the takeaway from it. And then for the police officer, it's, oh, now I get it. It was okay for me to do that, despite the fact that I might have gotten cussed out for it, right? Or I got yelled at for it. You brought me in here for it, opposed to it didn't happen at all. Why am I here? So I think that that's the only really genuine distinction. And we
Yeah,
try to make it clear to folks when we do outreach to let them know this is what the difference between the two are.
And also, it seems like that would be valuable. I don't know how many people make complaints, like make 100 complaints, so they kind of know this already, because that may be true too. But maybe that's a valuable thing to do kind of during intake, right? Just explain, these are the possible outcomes and this is why they're different. So again,
Understood.
just a thought.
Understood. And I think on our disposition letters, they also try to make it clear that these are the four outcomes and that they did the definition of what the outcomes are when the person receives a letter in the mail. So when the letter comes to them, it will say, these are the four possible outcomes. This is the one that yours fell under.
That's good. Thanks.
Any other questions for me before I move on? And I love questions, so feel free if you have them, please ask them.
Well, when you get to the legislation, I think I'm gonna go back to the concurrence rate, but I'd rather you finish your presentation and then we'll harass you completely.
Not a problem. Some of the other stuff you all asked questions about already, so I'll skip through some of this. So in your, I also just break down the complaints and stuff into your specific areas. So for 2026, you only have 6 complaints. For the 113 for the 13th precinct, 5 for the 17th. For 2025, you had 28 and 28 for the 13th and 11 for the 17th. Those by in no way, shape, or form are high numbers at all. They're actually extremely low compared to most other precincts in your borough and citywide. For mediation, there were no mediations conducted within your within regarding any complaint that took place in your precincts. All right, so legislation. There's two state legislation that or two pieces of state legislation that would impact the CCRB. Currently, when someone files a complaint to the CCRB, the final determination lies with the police commissioner. That is ingrained in charter. That is state law. The police commissioner is the only person that can levy discipline against an officer, no matter who comes up with the outcome, as long as it's administrative discipline. There is a bill in the state assembly and the state senate that would then change that process to give the CCRB final disciplinary authority in cases that the CCRB investigates. Now, just to add clarity, the CCRB is not the only body that investigates discipline. The NYPD does investigate its own discipline, but under different jurisdictions. Serious misconduct and corruption is investigated directly within the New York City Police Department, and then cases that are more, they're not misconduct. They're kind of just like they're more so mistakes that the officer may make or complaints that the officer may receive for things pertaining to the job itself. So the officer did not take a report when they came to my house. They let this person leave when I said that that person did something to me. Those type of things are handled within the police department by the chief of department. So only in cases where the CCRB conducted the investigation would then this bill change who levies the discipline and how the discipline sticks. And then if someone files a complaint with the CCRB and we attempt to investigate that complaint, but the details that we need to investigate that complaint are sealed because an individual went to court and their case was sealed, it's blind to everyone, even us. So when we created our bias-based policing and racial profiling unit, we were given the authority to do what's considered a 5-year look back. in that 5 year look back, we could then say this allegation of bias-based policing is unclear if there's an actual bias here. So now we need to go back into the officer's record and look 5 years back to see if there has been a genuine pattern of
Yeah,
police misconduct that relates to something that may be biased in any nature, whether it's about race, religion, sexual orientation, housing status, disability, whatever it is. So that 5 year look back would be helpful for us to be able to really say if this is genuinely um, biased based or not. Some of those cases are in fact involved in sealed records. So we're kind of hampered with an inability to really be able to do the full extent of our job because those sealed records are not accessible to us. A judge has to unseal those records and get that information over to us. That process by itself can take years. So that being the case, the CCRB is not as powerful as it should be based off of that law hampering. So hampering us. So the state also has legislation that's supposed to be voted on regarding exempting the CCRB from sealing statutes in order for us to fulfill our investigations. So those are the two pieces of legislation that more so directly impact the CCRB in the state.
Okay,
Quick question.
go ahead.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about what prompted these two specific resolutions or these assembly bill items? Like, what was the thought that went behind how these were formulated? I mean, because I understand it kind of logically consistent from your presentation, but I want to get a sense of how these were crafted.
So I believe so when it comes to the final determination, I just think a lot of people feel as though if we conduct an investigation and then after the investigation is conducted, we give it back to the police department to make the final determination, it then decreases the independence of the agency. So why would we then have to go back to the agency that the public, through creation of the CCRB and being 100% civilian, why would we then have to give that back to the agency that they said they didn't feel comfortable investigating their own misconduct? So I think elected officials saw that, and advocates advocated for that. And they said if it's going to be truly independent and if they're going to do the investigation, they might as well have the final say to be able to actually implement, because then you get what we call flips, or we get the deviations where we would then say this officer did do something wrong and we'll provide evidence, and then the commissioner would just say no. I don't think the officer did anything wrong, and we're not going to discipline the officer. And that then feels to a lot of the public like a waste of an investigation, because then nothing happens at the end of it. With the legislation regarding the sealing statutes, if we're going to be the ones conducting investigations, to tell us that there's information that we don't have access to also then limits the agency's ability to be truly independent and be able to conduct a true investigation. Because you're telling us the information that we need, we cannot get access to it. So I think that also is the next space where it feels like there's not real, true, genuine police oversight, because information can be hidden from us, and we would wait years, and we have a statute of limitations. So if the judge takes 3 years to then give us access, we've now extended our statute of limitations and can no longer investigate that complaint.
Go ahead, Dan.
so this, we did some work last year on sort of understanding the discovery process and some legislation to change that, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And like, this really brings me back to that, right? It's like, here is the information that's lacking. So it seems to me like that would be like, it's kind of, I mean, obviously there needs to be constraints and privacy, there are privacy concerns, but to
You're talking
me,
about information, you're saying?
yeah, like, if there's like victim information in there that should, but it does seem like, yeah, like you can't do your jobs if you can't get access to the sealed records that are gonna, and in some cases, I would think it's gonna improve, like if the police officer is gonna benefit from that.
My only question, I agree with that. My only question as a follow-up to me is what what was thought when they crafted the first bill to mask it?
Can you say that? Can you say that last part again?
Yeah, so this second agenda item or second assembly bill item looking at about, I know, I guess it's the first one, about unsealing information. What prompted when they crafted
The original.
The original,
Oh.
what was, do you know the thought process, why they felt so strongly about that?
So all I can say is the two things that correlated around the time that this happened, right? Because there's like a separation between the lawmakers and the agency itself. So two things. One, I think during the time that this bill was coming out, a case that was happening simultaneously was the case of Wayne Isaacs. And then there was a certain amount of difficulty in Wayne Isaacs' case. And for those that may not be familiar, Wayne Isaacs is the officer that shot and killed Delron Smalls in East New York, Brooklyn, after a road rage incident. So the police unions used a lot of different things in order to kind of delay the case coming to trial. And some of the cases that were necessary for the agency to review in order to go forward with a prosecution did in fact include sealed cases. So those things were happening simultaneously, and that happened in 2016 and it still not has come to prosecution yet. So I think
Wow.
those are some of the things that happen. Like, so those are the more public things that are in the paper that the elected officials could see, and it show how, justice or responsibility or accountability could be delayed because of kind of regulations like this.
So this is sort of tickling really vague memory of a bill that was maybe a city council member, city council bill that was vetoed by Adams, not like that last veto, but that was sort of trying to get around some of this and provide a little more independence and strength to the CCRB. Is that ringing bells to you? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I think the last set of bills it was included in the last set of bills that the previous mayor vetoed. That was the bill that would give the CCRB direct access to body worn camera footage.
Oh, that's what it was. Yep.
Yes. And unfortunately, during the hearing, this actually came up that the the fact that some of the video footage could be included in cases that are sealed was one of the arguments that the police department used to say why the access to body worn camera shouldn't be granted. So like these things do create these other hurdles for the agency because it just says that even though you're responsible for doing these investigations, information can be hidden from you. So in that, it does make that veto kind of sprung loudly that this is a hurdle that may need to be climbed over first in order for you to even get to a space where we could be given direct access to information that the NYPD has.
But another city council like this one, pass that bill again and have Mamdani sign it, like instead of vetoing it and
Yeah. So based off of the last article that I saw, they did discuss it, but they just didn't override it because they didn't have enough votes in the city council to then go back. And so they would need to now just convince more council members that they would need to give us this authority. But I think this is always still going to be a hurdle. So that will be the thing that may impact because the NYPD was very clear that there could be some genuine ramifications if we're given access to sealed records without knowing, and then we use that information, the city could then have a problem. So in that, this would still be one of the things that impacts us not only on a state level for us to be able to do our investigations for bias-based policing, but also on a city level with what access we could have to actual files. Like the NYPD would need to comb through every single file that they give us first, verify that they're not sealed, and then give us access to it based off of the NYPD's testimony in the last hearing that we did about this legislation.
Interesting.
Let me ask you about S4354. That's the bill that would let the CCRB adjudicate cases directly rather than sending them over to Police Plaza.
Yes.
So the concept, of course, is that if the police department is responsible for discipline, there's a certain degree of conflict of interest, and there may just be a different set of values. But it seems concerning to me as well that the adjudicator or the judge would be employed by CCRB under this proposition. So I wonder if there's not a third way. I also just want to note that we looked at some of the cases in your reports. I think the protest report for instance, not only not only enumerates the complaints, but it includes the letters from the NYPD that says this is why we're disagreeing with your recommended punishment. In the case of that report, a lot of it looks fairly reasonable, and it would be nice if CCRB and NYPD could come together and say what actually is reasonable. But there have also been incidents during protests, reported in the papers as well as in litigation, where some of the police conduct was very improper, where there were clearly false arrests, where supervisors gave orders to arrest people who were not, who no one witnessed as committing a crime. And the police commissioner again dismissed those charges. So there's certainly reason to take some of this out of the hands of the police department. It just seems concerning that instead it would just be CCRB's employee who would make the decision. So that might have sounded like a statement, but we'll pretend it was a question.
So I wouldn't be able to essentially speak to what the alternative to that process would be. I know right now what we're working towards in the current process is just transparency. So if you're going to say that you didn't agree with us, then why? And then we still have the NYPD discipline matrix in the meantime to hopefully increase the likelihood that we're both saying the same thing. So even in the means of discipline, is everyone here familiar with the NYPD discipline matrix?
I
Okay,
think we will.
so I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll explain the discipline matrix very, very quickly. So the discipline matrix is a document that was created by the NYPD at the directive of the city council. They were responsible for creating a document that evenly distributed discipline amongst New York City police officers, no matter who you know, your proximity to the commissioner, your proximity to the mayor, whoever you are. If you did this thing and it could be proven that you did this thing, you would be disciplined in this way. The only difference is that if it's mitigated, if it is aggravated, would be the only difference in what the discipline is, but everyone gets the same treatment. So what we did is we adopted the discipline matrix, and that's some of the things that increase concurrence between the CCRB and the police commissioner. I think the mainly where we differ when it comes to the police commissioner is if the officer did something that they believe is wrong or against the patrol guide. And I think that's where we've differed. And a lot of times that's in cases that raise to the level of APU. So if we're talking about taking away more than 10 vacation days, all the way up to suspension or termination, for the police officer, that's where we tend to disagree the most. But in most cases, we tend to agree. Regarding there being another avenue besides the CCRB being the employee, I could definitely, being the adjudicator of those cases, I could definitely take that back to my agency. But isn't this above my pay grade to add an extra layer to that discussion?
Well, we'd be glad to recommend you for a raise. But I mean, that will be, we do sometimes resolve to support legislation. And so here you've got one that seems to go in the right direction, but may then go a little too far for comfort. I just want to let members of our community talk. Susan wants to speak, and you will make that possible, right?
Yes.
1 second.
With Brian Alfonso, possible.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair and members of Community Board 6 Committee on Public Safety and Sanitation. And thanks to the presenter. You are very knowledgeable and informative. My name is Reverend Susan Nason, and I've lived in Stuyvesant Town and Peter Cooper Village my entire life. I'm here tonight as a neighbor, a parent, a grandmother of teenage girls, and someone who loves this community deeply. I'm also the daughter of a former Community Board 6 chair, Judge Stanley Nason. Last week's reported sexual assault of a 14-year-old Stuyvesant Town has shaken many of us to our core. Our neighborhood is home to thousands of families and young people, including my family, who should feel safe walking to school, visiting friends, or simply being outside in their own community. We are asking the Safety Committee to help us secure a stronger, more visible police presence, especially consistent foot patrols in and around Peter Cooper and Stuyvesant Town. Visibility matters. Deterrence matters. Our kids need to see adults in authority who are present and paying attention. The city as a whole feels far less safe, and we welcome your help, your suggestions, and your guidance to improve the situation. We also welcome collaboration on better lighting, safety, education, and clear communication with residents. We cannot undo what happened, but we can act together to help prevent the next tragedy. Thank you for standing with our community and our children. And I will turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you. And Michelle is raising the same question. What's particular? So for those who don't know, there was an assault of a sexual assault of a 14-year-old in Stuytown, I think in an elevator lobby, if I'm correct.
Yeah,
Because it's a really like when you walk in.
yeah, just when
Like
you
the
walk in, there's
vestibule.
those mailboxes and
Yeah.
everything in that
And-
lobby.
and what's most stunning and what Michelle raises in the Q&A is that the accused assailant has 32 previous arrests.
Wow.
So I don't think this is a CCRB question, but it is a question that I think we want to look at. And we'll have to do that in a subsequent meeting. But why did somebody with 32 priors
Yeah.
have the opportunity to do that?
Well, and I mean, it sort of actually goes back to our discussion from last month about treatment court, like what's going on. I mean, it's not the same because we know anything. I don't know anything about it. But I also wonder if this isn't something that is worth, thinking about in terms of what our budget requests are. And that maybe, Susan, it may be worth talking to the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee, who kind of takes the lead on our budget requests to city and NYPD. I know I'll certainly keep it in mind as that cycle comes around,
That's
but
the 13th, right?
Budget and
Yes.
Governmental
No,
Affairs.
it's the 13th precinct.
Correct. I didn't
Oh,
want to take that
Stuytown,
up
yeah.
tonight because we don't.
We won't, but
we
I
don't-
think we need to and find out why.
Right, we don't have enough of the facts.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know
Information.
where they are,
Right,
where these
so-
assaults were.
I propose that we, maybe we, for next month, we take that up as its, its own unique issue. We get kind of whatever stakeholders that.
The 13th and.
Right,
Yeah.
we'll see what we can learn,
Yeah.
And how much we can get, but I don't want to take.
CCRB is totally different.
Yes.
Topic.
It's not a CCRB.
No.
issue.
And it's not right.
Unless you want to take it up, John, but I don't think it.
He's like shaking now.
But I appreciate that, Susan.
Put that above your pay grade.
But yes, this is,
Yeah.
we're all quite aware of it. So we will look at what we can do.
Thank you, Susan.
Does anyone have any more CCRB questions?
You know
I'm sorry?
it. I said, you know it.
I do.
Does anybody else?
I wanted to, go ahead.
Does anybody else have any? Maybe you'll ask what I have.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a couple of just like sort of, forgive me, I am an editor. But I had two things. One, I noticed on the executive summary for the January report, it said, like, the first bullet is 44% have been open for 4 months or fewer, which, and 61% have been open. Oh, I'm sorry, I misread this. I will take it all back. But there is a typo in here somewhere where you say meditation, or the presentation says meditation instead of mediation, which I actually found kind of charming. was like, sometimes a little meditation might actually help the situation, you know? But anyway, just wanted to, pass that along, so, one other question, there was, in figure 30, there was comments about false statements. And I don't know, it read that that was false statements by the complainants.
What you wrote was amazing.
Oh, he's hearing us. So, okay.
Was, but are there times, that was my presumption, it wasn't specified that it was false statements by the complainant. But what happens, I mean, police are human too, I'm sure they make false statements, whether intentionally or not, and memory is fallible.
You're talking about FATO, the CCRB can now, in addition to, FATO, can also, bring, I guess, a charge against the police officer if the officer makes an
No, I'm talking about actually in figure 30, where it talked about things, cases being dropped because of false statements. I think that's what it was. I don't have it in front of me. But it wasn't clear how many, who were necessarily the source of those false statements. Wait, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Jahai.
Hey, give me one moment. Let me try to meet you where you're at so I can try to clarify that section of the report. So you said figure 30. Do you know what page it was on?
I don't.
Give me one moment.
While you're looking, I just wanted to mention to the community members who are concerned about that Stuytown incident. You should also consider attending the 13th Precinct Community Council. That is where you can talk directly to the police officers. And they will be very attentive, I think, and they'll probably have information before we do. I just wanted to get that in there.
Okay, so all right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Just let me know if this is the figure you're referring to. I did find a figure 30.
Yeah, I think it was a footnote of it, but I did write down figure 30, so this is in the January report.
Okay, does that look familiar for figure 30?
Yes.
Okay, so these are specifically false statements or they're considered either false official or untruthful statements. We are required to call them untruthful statements. These are actually untruthful statements that are made by the police officer to the CCRB. They just fall under different categories where it comes to degree in the officer may have made the statement incorrectly. So it goes from the officer intentionally being deceitful to the officer being just not remembering clearly to the point where it then becomes
Right.
they didn't remember clearly so much that it was against the rules for them not to remember that clearly. Right. So
Well,
but it's not intentional.
what if a complainant makes a false statement? Like, that just means that the complaint basically is that much less valid if it's not.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
It's
That'd be
not
more like an unfounded complaint. Right. So
Right.
if the civilian literally says this officer did something to me that we prove that the officer completely did not do, the officer's disposition just turns out to be unfounded. But there's no punishment or there's no consequences for the civilian. We just prove that the officer didn't do what they were accused of, and then we give that back to the police department.
Okay, I got a couple more, but they're quick.
Okay.
Um, one is when lawsuits, and this is not really CCRB, but if there is a lawsuit, I'm sure if a complaint has been adjudicated by the CCRB, that is powerful in a lawsuit. So like I was noodling around and I saw somebody, an officer, there had been a civil trial and he was ordered, or there was a payment of $5,000. Is the NYPD paying that or is the police officer paying that?
Got it. So it kind of depends. So what they did before de Blasio left office is they did change the law to reflect that a portion of a qualified immunity. And just to make sure we're all using the same language, qualified immunity is the protection that police officers get when they engage some type of activity that harms the public, but then fell within the kind of the rules of what police officers are allowed to do. So a portion of qualified immunity was then supposed to be removed. So up to $5,000 would be what the police officer is supposed to pay, and then the rest of that bill is supposed to still be covered by the city of New York. So it was like kind of like them phasing out this qualified immunity, but I believe at the time it stopped there. So police officers, it's like a deductible, right? It stops at the 5,000, and then the city picks up the rest of the bill.
Okay,
And just so you know, we passed a resolution, opposing qualified immunity, which is already sort of phased out. The reality, there's been a lot of research on it, especially by a law professor out at UCLA. And police officers are always complaining that qualified immunity is essential because somebody could sue them and they could lose their house. And the reality is that police officers almost never pay anything.
right,
The police
We do.
department will always back them,
Yeah.
even, unless their conduct is completely outside.
Yeah.
That's us paying for it.
okay, I got two more, and again, quick.
You just said to.
I know, but I lied.
It's.
I was wrong.
Teasing
It
you.
was, okay, I was looking at like the precincts, but honestly, we're at 43rd between Second and Third in Manhattan, very close to the UN. I live very close to here. 90% of the cops that I see are actually counterterrorism unit folks.
Okay.
And I did not see that on the list of any of the precincts. So just wondering kind of how they're adjudicated in that sense, because they act like beat cops.
Yes, I mean, as long as they are considered sworn members of service by the New York City Police Department, then we still have jurisdiction to investigate them. Now, if they are specifically hired by the UN, if they're specifically hired by the federal government, if they are, so as long as they are sworn members of service within.
Okay, but instead of having a precinct, it says CTU.
Right, so that would be considered their command. So the command really wouldn't make any difference. It's more so rank. So like the commissioner, we can't investigate. The chief of department, we can't investigate, but we can then investigate, the from those chief of department and down. So the unit, but their command, like the narcotics unit or the strategic response unit, all of those units, we could still, even though they operate or may have a central unit in the one police plaza, they still fall within our jurisdiction to investigate if someone files a complaint against them.
So how is that reported then in these reports?
So
In these
if we did have
monthly?
someone that wasn't specific to a command, I'd have to get back to you regarding because they might just put other, but I'll have to get back to you regarding how they would list them in the report to indicate that that they've taken a complaint about them. So I'll get back to you about that.
It's not a biggie, but I just was curious, because I would say more than half of the cops I see on the street are CTU, not 17th precinct.
Understood.
My reading was that, it's actually the geographic area rather than the command that determines if you list them as a 13th or 17th precinct.
Well, I think there were both. Weren't there, like where it's reported and where the officer?
Right, but I'm saying even if it's a strategic response, unit, if the conduct or misconduct or alleged misconduct occurs within the jurisdiction of the 13th precinct, within the
It
geographic.
would be included in the
It
17th.
shows as a 13th
Okay.
precinct, so.
So I believe that's true, but I just want to be 1,000% certain.
I appreciate your diligence on that. And really, my last question is, it's not you guys, but where would you report placard abuse?
So that would go back to the police. And that's placard abuse of just city employees or placard abuse of New York City police officers?
Yeah, I won't tell you the example because it's too stupid, but it involves a cop parking in a handicap spot to go kiteboarding or kite surfing and like putting his badge in the windshield. So he didn't get ticketed for parking in the handicap spot.
Got it. So that might be the chief of department, but what you can do, someone could still make that complaint to the CCRB. We will verify which part of which department within the police department is supposed to go to, and we'll forward it there through a soft transfer. But
Awesome.
I definitely will go back to the police department.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
And I really am finished.
Yeah.
Well, refreshing.
Yeah.
Are you in Colombo?
Hey, right, I'd have to be walking out the door.
So no, but this time is taken, we take note of this when you complain that the meeting goes too long.
I never complain the meeting goes too long.
We'll see. So, so a large percentage of cases seem to be closed, because the complaint is either withdrawn, or you're unable to investigate, which seem like two separate things. Why is a complaint withdrawn with some frequency?
So a couple of things may happen. So a civilian may just not like the fact that the case is taking too long to close. A civilian can then also feel threatened, or some other activity may be happening within the precinct that may make them feel to some extent threatened by local police officers from that precinct. So and then some people may start the process, and then it's explained to them as to how arduous the process might be, and then they may withdraw. So what we were running into before the pandemic was that people just didn't like coming down to One Police Plaza to to 100 Church Street to do the interview. So then they would drop it because of that. They don't want to go where we're at in order for them, because we're so close to One Police Plaza, and then police officers also like in the elevator bay, like they're all over the place because they're also coming in to do interviews regarding other cases, and that made a lot of people fearful to come in. Since we now allow for people to do the process virtually, we just do a Teams call. That has since reduced how many people drop the cases, but there's literally a myriad of reasons why people eventually drop the cases. But those are just to name a few as to why they would.
And when there's a hearing at One Police Plaza, the complainant does or does not, is or is not required to appear.
They're not required. So it's based off of the tactic of APU. So if the APU needs the direct testimony from the civilian, then they'll call them in. Sometimes they won't need it. They'll have the body worn camera footage. They'll be able to prove that argument without putting this person on the stand. And then there could be other reasons why somebody might just not feel comfortable being on the stand. So for those reasons, they're not required to, but they may be asked to in the event the tactic would be helpful to hear directly from the civilian. Because remember, they're saying this back to the police department. So sometimes the way that person articulates could help. Sometimes it might not.
How are your investigators trained?
So they're actually trained internally. So the CCRB created a 6-week training program to kind of lay out the history of the CCRB's process, the best methods to utilize the equipment that we have to engage in training, and then to make sure that the training is trauma informed and ensure that when they do their interviews, that they're not tainting the investigation by asking questions that may be leading questions, so forth and so on. So that's a 16-week process that they have to engage in order for them to fully understand our process. After they engage in the 6-week process, they then have to shadow another investigator for another couple of weeks. They do other things like come with us out to outreach events just to get a gauge of what we speak to members of the public about. And then after kind of like a 6-month process, if they're still good to go, still want to stay with our agency, then they're full-fledged investigators. But the training process is pretty long.
So I asked that in part because I remember back in Kelly's days, he complained that, the investigations were just not well done. Is that a complaint that you still get from NYPD?
Not really. So I think we get those complaints more so from the NYPD's union, where they try to claim bias, than we get the complaints were not done in a way that was thorough from the NYPD itself. So the NYPD has never really complained about the efficacy of our investigations, more than they'll complain about how long it's taken for us to get that complaint over to them. And then they may not have enough time to take a second look at it and then put it on the calendar for adjudication. So I haven't really heard any specific complaints from them that said that this investigation was just not well done.
Okay, and how are relationships now that Jessica Tisch has been the head of the department?
So I want to say that I think we've had the highest amount of concurrence with this specific. So that's how we typically test the pulse, right? It's based off of concurrence. So the more we agree, the friendlier the relationship is, I guess. So for for the purposes of just making that statistical relationship, this is the probably the highest amount of agreement that we've had from a commissioner, I think, in history. Prior to that, we hovered around 60 or 70% for the entirety of the Adams administration. It kind of went, it was ebbs and flows. For the de Blasio administration, once again, ebbs and flows. But for this specific commissioner, I think we've had a higher amount of concurrence than anything else.
Have you been there?
Tish was there. I think the Commissioner Tish was there. I think this is the third year in the
Oh, I'm there.
oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been here since 2018, August of 2018. So I came in, the person that was the commissioner it was right before Bratton. It was right before Dermot Shea. I think that might have been Ed O'Neill. It was right, it was O'Neill, then Dermot Shea, then the significant number of commissioners under Mayor Adams.
Because you're super knowledgeable. It's
Thank you.
really shows.
Okay, so does the committee have any other interests that they want to raise? I mean, the only thing, as in terms of action, I think the only thing that we would probably possibly be interested in is supporting or not supporting the two bills in Albany. But is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, is there any way to hear from from the police on this too, or their thought process? Or have we tried, have we reached out to them? Because I see two parties.
I think, well, go ahead. You had a.
No, I was saying, hold on, my laptop is dying, so let me just put on the charger. One moment.
No, I was saying, I mean, I really appreciate CCRB being here and hearing their framing. I'd also like to kind of hear both sides before.
So first of all, the real opponent is the PBA.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which I mean, I think is naturally.
Yeah,
right, unions.
I'm less interested in that as much as kind of just, the other side of complaints. Because
They have an 84% of concurrence. Clearly, this has been working well with the NYPD.
I still like to hear their side. I mean, is that not possible or?
I think it's possible.
We
can extend an invitation.
I'd like to maybe just throw out something that I think a lot about. I worked in trauma for many years. I think a lot of officers on the street are ones that are carrying quite a lot of trauma. I'm just wondering if that ever plays into a retraining or some process for them to process trauma. I mean, hurt people hurt people. And I know it's not looked upon in a beautiful way, because you're supposed to be tough. I'm a cop, I'm tough. But this is a huge issue across the country and clearly in New York, and not addressing it, I think has really created a lot of problems. Clearly
Yeah.
out in Minneapolis too, although I'm not gonna cut him any slack on that, but
But
he
no,
had his own trauma, and we have to, understand that. So, does that ever play into any of the, not discipline, but like retraining or addressing issues that the police officer
Right.
might be having? Do they ever have to talk to somebody, a social worker or psychotherapist, somebody who can actually deal with trauma? I mean, I just
That's
don't
the
understand why
meditation,
nothing's
right?
happened. Yes, that's why meditation is good.
So we've on our end, we wouldn't be able to take the officer's trauma into consideration. And for us, they did the right thing or they did the wrong thing. However, when there was a proliferation of police officers taking their own lives
Yeah.
during the de Blasio administration, our previous chair did recommend that they have more psychological evaluations of officers after they've engaged in police activity, especially when you have to discharge a weapon or you see you see someone that has eventually lost their life when you have to respond to that, that can definitely take a toll. So our previous chair did encourage the NYPD to take the officers' trauma into consideration more frequently, but that was just a kind of like a public decry saying that
Yeah.
I think that they should definitely make sure that they're taking care of
Anything.
their officers' mental health from their
Yeah.
standpoint, but we just can't, we can't mandate that.
Yeah, okay,
And,
thank you.
and Justin, the other side of this actually, which I didn't think about, is that NYCLU, which generally does support CCRB, has also been very critical of it in the past, is for not, for instance, substantiating a number of cases.
Okay. That's kind of the third part, like cause that introduces like, you have like the two main stakeholders really, and then you kind of have a third perspective, which is really interesting too.
So, would you guys like to go any place with this? Do you want to follow up? We'll obviously get back some answers and we can talk
We
about.
definitely can, have a discussion. There is a lot of questions still. I mean, the thing about a police commissioner being able to kind of veto discipline is very concerning to me, no matter who that person is. Like,
Yeah.
they could be the most, balanced person in the world doing the right thing, but one person who has that power is concerning.
They also have a bias, like,
A bias.
candidly, they have a
yeah.
bias, well, they have, they're,
Well, and they may, know the person or know family or.
Yeah.
It's.
Well, there's also
Which-
an interesting perspective. A friend of mine who was a law enforcement officer said that only law enforcement officers should judge cops because only they understand what the cop has been through. Now, I mean, I think, I thought that was risible, but there is something to that. Now, the CCRB board does have people who are appointed by the police commissioner, right? So
Yeah.
that point of view is actually brought in. But it is, there is a sort of balance that's sort of attained that way. But that's why I was concerned about this legislation, which takes it away from the commissioner completely and puts it in the hands of the CCRB. So now you have basically the prosecutor is also hiring the adjudicator. And, it may be somebody who's theoretically acting independent, but we know, just as we know with mediation, who's paying you. So that can be a concern as well.
when it comes to transparency, so that first bill, assuming that there's the appropriate constraints, I mean, is there really an argument against?
Yeah.
Assuming that there are appropriate constraints, because they could understand, are there really arguments against more transparency? I mean, because
Are you talking about when seeing sealed records?
Yeah.
the first one, yeah, because
Sealed records.
I understand it conceptually, like, I understand the logic and I understand like still having constraints, but broader, the notion of more transparency seems to me to be kind of serving both sides.
Yeah.
Well, in this
Well, it's
case,
not, is it both?
and just to be clear,
Yeah,
the sealed records will not be unsealed for all the rest of us.
Right,
Yeah.
it's just, they will have access.
Right, they will have access, and the sealed records can be records about the police officer or about the complainant, is that right?
Yeah, the portion of the complaint that's sealed is mainly for to gauge the conduct of the officer during that record. So the CCRB will make a direct request. We need this information pertaining to this specific case, and then that's going to further our investigation. So if there's details there that are not relevant to our case, then we won't even request it.
yeah, because I remember when people were really against like that, like dashboard cameras and all of that, and transparency tends to make things, I feel like, better for everyone, assuming that it's within constraints and, doesn't, but yeah.
I mean, I think a prime thing why this is important is long-term police behavior. If it's 5 years and this is an ongoing issue, don't you need to know that before you
Yeah.
can even investigate anything? Like, you need a foundation. Now, maybe he never did, or he or she never did anything, and you know that too. But
Right.
just like the guy who, I'm sorry, attacked this girl had how
Yeah,
many
32.
things? 32. Like, don't you wanna know that? So to me, I think, in a way, that's a no-brainer in my mind. The other part is just who adjudicates. And I think one person, the police commissioner, doing that is just, I'm not comfortable with that. Even if I loved, I don't have any relationship to the police commissioner, but even if I loved that person, totally trusted them, one person can't make those decisions.
And the position changes.
Right, exactly. You get new people.
And there's
So,
no accountability there except to the mayors.
Yeah, there's none. Zero.
But I
So,
will say the kind of, I mean, this is the way the system is now, but like the state, the idea is that you have the, like, the people vote in somebody in this and grants authority to the state to adjudicate that. That's, I think, conceptually, but I also agree with, that's too much power for one person.
just, yeah, I mean, even
Yeah.
if it was a committee,
Yeah,
and
that's
a
why I'm
balance
not-
committee, and everyone had a say.
Yeah.
including the commissioner, if that was the case.
Yeah.
That's one thing, but if one person's making that decision,
I mean, I thought one of the super interesting things in the presentation was the idea that the panel has to, it can't be like all from one set of appointees. And to me,
Right.
that makes it
yeah,
like
balanced.
more credible,
Balanced, more
yeah.
credible, exactly. The CCRB.
Is it a
balanced.
majority vote, the 2 out of 3, or does it have to be unanimous?
Yeah, so it could be it has to be majority rules, and then sometimes the panelists have the ability to abstain even in the 3-member panel. That's where they can't come to an agreement. So one could then abstain, and then you have one person in favor, one person against, and that's where it goes up to the full board, and it still has to be majority rules.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have another question, and maybe you touched upon this, but when you were listing the potential complaints and kind of what triggers a complaint, is there a different scoring between like how are they looked at? Because obviously, like base would be like police harassment is very different than, let's say, perceived offensive comment. So is there a way to score that differently? Because some I see is kind of subjective. And still, important, but subjective, whereas other are a little bit more
Forced.
objectively problematic. And so I'm wondering kind of how that's scored differently, or if that's viewed,
Now, when you say score, do you mean in the sense of how they're disciplined for it, or do you mean in the sense of how do we come to the determination that misconduct occurred?
Really the second one, because I understand the first one I think is kind of self-evident, but the second one, like how do you approach that? Because there are different gradients of being problematic.
So when it comes to the CCRB, the only difference between the cases is the sense of the investigator investigating the cases has to be more experienced depending on what the case is about. So when we're talking about level 1 investigators, which would be, fresh new investigators, they may only investigate things like abuse of authority and, let's say, discourtesy. When you start to level up, you then get more things added on to the things you can investigate, because now you have a more trained eye to be able to identify the things inside of the individual cases. So the only difference in looking at them that's more of a grade point is how long have you been at the agency, how long have you exercised an ability to really be able to identify if the right or wrong conduct occurred in an interaction.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think if we're interested in anything, it might be the legislation, and we want to hear alternative viewpoints.
Yeah.
And we seem to have drained ourselves of questions, is that right?
No more questions then.
I can always come up with some, but I don't feel immune. And I just want to thank you. This has been super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, really, you're amazing.
Really
presenter
appreciate,
of
yeah.
Incredible information.
Do you have any questions? No. Okay.
I just never
heard of that. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, right? The things you don't know.
So I think we're gonna say thank you very much.
Yes,
Obviously,
thank you.
you've
Yeah,
been
thank
very appreciated. We'll take whatever follow-up you can send to us. Should we then seek alternative viewpoints, we will also let you know and invite you. And other than that, I think we're done.
Deeply appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was really good. And like Ann said, you're very knowledgeable and excellent
yeah.
presentation.
Very impressive. We're
Thank
lucky
you.
to have you.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a great, wonderful night. And if I don't speak to you all tomorrow, have a great weekend as well. Be safe.
Yeah.
Stay
thank you.
warm.
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Seriously.
So moving on to the chair's
Well,
report.
there's one thing that it's not really, wasn't a question for him, but one of the things I thought we were talking about protest and like police presence. I go to my fair share of shuffles, as they call them. They are not
I think we
marches.
can imagine.
Yeah, right? Cause that's what you do, right? But I almost never actually see cops. You
Really?
used to. They are not even doing traffic control. You see them kind of at the end, like at the dispersal points.
Mhm.
But I'm just kind of, I don't know if anybody else has like had the
I
opportunity
never
to
see
observe.
cops in general. I'm trying to think the last time I saw one.
I see
Oh, at the
cops.
at a traffic circle
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
always see them,
Yeah.
traffic
I
cops.
see them around
I
the.
don't know, maybe I'm not
UN.
paying attention.
Maybe you're just not protesting enough.
Mm.
A lot of the conduct has changed. I mean, they're not allowed to kettle anymore. They're not allowed.
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
Which is really causing.
But it's also like the difference between, organized protests and, I mean, the obvious response is disorganized, but like non-official,
Mhm.
which again, being by the UN and like Commercial Plaza, like they're every day, like there's something there. Especially like 47th and First.
So are you proposing that we look into something?
No, really, it was one of these
It
questions. I
is, I
just
mean,
raised, like-
obviously protest policing, is still a concern. And we'll see what happens next. And we've seen the report from CCRB on protest policing. We know that the
Yeah.
strategic, response unit, has been problematic. We saw the NYCLU presentation about it, but we also know that these are people, who are trained to do two almost entirely.
Right.
Very
things.
different.
Right.
Totally different.
Totally different and.
Yeah, because I
And
feel like
contradictory.
there's a big, I feel like there's a difference between like a protest for really any issue that's, like I said, is legal, and then protest that could, where a terrorist museum unit might be, I'll say necessary, but like is more
That
applicable.
kettling used to cause problems,
Oh.
like that can go to violence when you kettle people.
That-
And also, I
Usually
mean,
that
I
just
think it's also a
escaped.
concern, which is, I have not experienced this, but where there can be counter protests.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it would be really helpful to have, sort of a third party there to intervene and just like keep the two sides separate, so. Just a thought I'm throwing out there. Cause I've been really struck by it, that even traffic control is typically handled by, like, kind of marshals, like unofficial marshals that are the organizers, train and manage, so.
I think the protesting is particularly important to our area because.
Yeah.
They, like you said, they happen all the time. So I do think we want to be keeping our eyes open about that.
I think so as well, but I haven't seen a lot of, complaints or litigation in the last year or so.
No.
And there has been some very hefty litigation, in the past, and that's cost the city a lot and has demonstrated a lot of really bad conduct. But if we haven't seen it lately, it's conceivable that methods have changed.
Yeah, right.
Did you sent that email in relation to CCRB? Like, what was the intent of
I'm sorry,
the email you sent about the protest? Like, what made you think about that? Was it just the article you read on the Alchemist, or?
Well, because first CCRB has
Okay.
a report on
Yeah,
it, and secondly, that, we're not a very high crime district.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of complaints against police
Right.
officers, as you said.
Right.
Yeah.
You do hope that the complaints are examined. And we've met with the police commanders and they all say that they're on top of it. So the bigger issue for us is probably protest. Now, in fairness, the data, the demographics of our district are such that, it may be a subpopulation in our district that's actually disproportionately affected by whatever
That's
police
the whole
misconduct
thing.
there
For
is.
sure.
Mhm.
That's the thing.
I heard a statistic that, of it's not stop and frisk, but, stops, driving stops, like driver stops. 84% of the people stopped were people of color, and 4% of them were white.
Right, and we know what the demographics of race in our district are.
Right.
So that is potentially a concern that we should have. But we don't have data right now
We don't.
that demonstrates that, so. Let us move on quickly. So we will ask, NYPD and also Danny, I think. We'll try to get whatever information we can about the Stuyvesant, incident. I think it's not just that a crime was committed in an area that's considered safe, but that this guy has this 32,
Yes.
prior.
What do you think about getting somebody from Stuytown Is that like maybe what
Like
represented?
this Town Tenants Association. or
Yeah, more so
something?
because I want to understand kind of, like, obviously, I know why they feel unsafe, but I want to hear from, I mean, this is a resident, but I want to hear kind of broader, like, what the kind of vibe, like, why they feel that way, and kind of how it can best serve if we do come up with any suggestion.
And isn't one of our public members?
Yeah, Susan Steinberg is the president of the,
Oh,
Tenants Association of
Okay.
Stuytown, yeah.
That was
Right.
good.
So we can look into that.
Yeah.
We'll, I don't wanna have a meeting until it looks like we actually will have information about it. And everyone, of course, is looking for this, so.
And I think it is good to delve a little bit more into, what was how did this person, like, how did that 32 crimes? Like, how did that happen? Like, how did that happen? Like, what's the whole, situation? So, without coming to any conclusions or either way.
At this point, right. Also I believe it's the Waterfront Committee is looking at safety at Stuyvesant Cove. I'm just mentioning that, and it may be that Brian knows more than I do about it, so he might want to say something.
Well, I do know that they have discussed it, I believe, in a couple meetings now, including, vandalism that's taking place.
So we're not dealing with that. I'm just letting you know. For those of you who have started watching the Sanitation Foundation, stuff.
Are you doing it?
Yeah,
I haven't
That-
started any lessons yet.
It's actually good stuff. I mean, it's not production quality, but it's interesting. I only watched the first two, segments, but it's actually informative and interesting.
And
I-
And what did you
10
learn?
Only 10.
Well, and it turns out there is an exam.
yes,
Oh,
and
There
assignments,
is a
right?
2-question
Assignments.
exam, and it is so simple that if you fail it, you will be so embarrassed.
So
So
my
I
orange guy
warn
could
you
do it.
that this is a dangerous test. And finally, I'm just gonna mention this because it's obligatory. District needs, but I'm not gonna say anything more right now. And if there's no other business,
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
you don't have to second it.
all right.
Stu, we do have to talk a little bit about the district needs. The budget committee would like other committees to start thinking about the narrative portions about the district needs. I can keep it very brief. Do I have the floor?
Go for it.
I think you've taken it.
Sometimes in life one has to, so. Okay, thank you for allowing me to seize the floor. All right, everyone, especially older members know what our district needs statement is. It's a document that we work on throughout the year, and at the end of October, we have to submit it to the city. The city uses it along with city agencies and our elected officials like the city council and the mayor to inform budget allocations. This board is probably most familiar with the budget request element of this report, where you ask for specific things and you rank them and we vote on them. What members may not be as familiar with is the narrative part. There are actual sort of long answer elements of the report that oftentimes get neglected. And we're really trying to redouble our efforts to pay attention to those this year. The way that the board has decided to do that is by essentially transforming this report and each section of the report into a resolution. Before I move on to the resolution, I'll share my screen and show you where you can find this report in case you'd like to take a look at it.
Yeah, can you explain is the resolution format mandatory and why do you feel that's beneficial?
The resolution format is mandatory, and it was discussed at the budget committee and at exec. It's seen as beneficial because committee members are already familiar with the resolution element, the resolution format. And then once they are done working on that, the text that is written can then be transferred easily to the actual report that needs to be submitted to the city. We're not going to submit to the city 10 different resolutions from 10 different committees. They're all going to be merged at the end. But since the committees are already familiar with the way resolutions look and work, it was judged by exec and by the budget committee that this would be a good tool to shepherd the process along.
But you do have to then translate this back to, to ordinary language again.
Not really. The resolution is structured such that it will be written though exactly the way it will appear in the report.
Okay.
So just for those who, so I don't take up more of your time, you all can see the website, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, this is the budget committee page on the website. This is where the report can be found right here in this section. You can click on it and you will see this is what the report looks like. It's many dozens of pages long, so I won't bore you with it. You can look at it on your own time. But I do recommend you take a look at it. Elected officials do look at this, agencies look at this. So we do want to make sure that we put the best product forward so that our district's needs are shown in the most accurate and realistic way possible. Here's
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I mean, to me, this is also a tool for us because it tells us that we're responsible for these, I mean, if we have to make the statement, then we have to go back and say, well, what is it actually important to us as a committee?
Very much so. Yes, this is a tool for us. This is a tool for the public who maybe moves into the district and wants to learn more about it. And for the members who join the board and want to know more about what the needs of the district are. And as community board members, you are those that are there, boots on the ground, who theoretically should know your community the best because you live there every day. But yes, exactly right. Here's the resolution. Forgive the dummy text in some of this. This is meant to be filled in by the board, by the committee. But essentially, there are a couple of sections, two main sections. One, the report asks you, the report is divided up into like 10 different sections, and each section is titled by a specific subject matter area. The one that pertains to you is public safety and emergency services. And I need to check, but I believe there may be another one. They break the agencies up differently than we do in our committee names. But let's start with this one for now. Public safety and emergency services. It asks you to select what, in your opinion, is the most important issue in the realm of public safety and emergency services. And it gives you this list of choices to pick one, and also gives you the option to write in something completely different if you really feel that the most important issue is not listed here. Currently, for the most recent report, CB6 has judged general crime to be the most important issue. What you guys should do for your next meeting is, and we will send this resolution to you tomorrow morning, look at this list, think about what you think the most important issue in this district is in the realm of public safety and emergency services, and then make a selection. You don't have to do it on this document. You can just do it on an email, on a piece of paper, send it to the office, and then we'll collect them, and then we'll send them to everyone so that everyone can get a sense of what everyone else is thinking, and then you guys can discuss at your next meeting. If you think general crime is still the most important issue, indicate that. If you think it's not and something else, indicate that. Preferably not on this document, but in an email that you send to the office. And then once you've done that, you're asked to write a little blurb about why you think that is the most important issue. This is the current blurb that exists for general crime, our selection of general crime. You can use this as a guide. You can scrap this and think of something else. Or if you're not ready there, if you're not there yet, you can put down some bullet points or talking points about why you think the particular issue that you chose as most important is in fact most important. And then the committee can take everyone's input and see if it can reach a consensus. And if it does, then you will make this known on the resolution by indicating which the committee thinks is the most important. You have to agree on one. So that's where the discussion comes in.
On part.
Are there any kind of open meetings laws about discussing this? Kind of sending emails around about this that are not public, or does it not matter because we're gonna discuss it at a meeting after?
Generally, it's not good to be sending around a group email discussing this. It's better to, if you're going to discuss this with your fellow members, do it, you know, 1 or 2 members at a time off to the side on a phone call or something like that. Or collect your thoughts and bring those thoughts to the meeting where then you can engage in a discussion. But if you're starting to sort of discuss this throughout in the intervening time between this meeting and the next, and then you come in with pretty much everything formulated, that does start to,
Yeah,
you know, look suspicious.
yeah,
But essentially, however you do it, collect your thoughts, think about this, and then bring your thoughts to the next meeting and have a discussion. You don't have that many issues here. And this blurb is meant to be, you know, several sentences. It's not meant to be a treatise. It's not Anna Karenina, you know, it's meant to be succinct. And then there is an optional section where you can talk about needs that you think our district has in the realm of public safety and in the realm of emergency services. If you're not feeling particularly effusive about those topics and you don't want to do that one, that's fine. It is optional. This particular section is, but the only one that is mandatory is what do you think the most important public safety issue is in this district among this choice, or one that you choose for yourself and write in, and why do you think that? Now, where you're not expected to come with a fully formed explanatory paragraph for your choice, because you don't know whether the committee will ultimately agree on your choice. And what'll happen is once there's consensus among the committee members, then 1 or 2 members of the committee can then take all the input and write a blurb that can be reviewed by the committee, and then hopefully we'll have a nice finished product.
And so I'm glad you've intervened, because I was going to try to do a draft first to start it and get it rolling, but now that you have announced it this way, it's up to everyone to think it through. And I am always struck every time I see you with the background with the Chrysler building behind you, because it's centered and you're centered, and so there's always a horn coming out of the top.
So-
They don't call me the demon of Manhattan Community District 6 for nothing. We municipal demons live in the depths of the East River, as you can see from the image on your screen.
I'm just glad you're on our side.
And those who not, so we will send this to you. We will send this to you either tonight or tomorrow morning. Brian will. He'll send you a link to this. Again, don't start putting comments in this. Put it in your own notes and in something that you send to the office in an email. We'll set a reasonable deadline, but we'd like to have this maybe at least a week in advance from everyone, so then we can send it all to you and you can see what everyone else has said and you have some time to review it. We don't want to be sending this to you 5 minutes before the meeting and you've not had a chance to look at it. I think the conversation will be better if everyone has had a chance to really read the input of their fellow committee members. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay,
So-
so we'll send this to you, and yes.
Of course, a question or two.
Mhm.
Where public safety and sanitation So is that a different
You
thing
have to go
or
on that list.
is that, it's on that list?
It's
as-
one thing, it doesn't
Okay,
matter.
Okay,
Yes, sanitation. Oops. Hold on.
Different
That's the kind of the
it's
limit.
in a different
on that.
section. Okay, so it's still in there. And then the other thing is, we never talk about FDNY. And should we?
I don't know. So Matt,
That's interesting.
I can't remember who was on the committee when Matt was chair, but he did bring in FDNY one day to talk about, you know, smoke alarms and fire safety. And the only issue that was of the special timely interest was the batteries on e-bikes. And we haven't seen terribly serious issues about that. like
Not in
that.
this district, yeah.
Because most buildings have totally changed and not allowing them in certain
Well,
places.
One of the places
Ours
I'm
didn't.
concerned is in my building, they have cut way back on the heat because they're cheap. Somebody new is managing it. And I really, no, it is. And from an environmental perspective, I think that's great. Like I should not be wearing a sundress in my house in February. You know what I
No,
mean?
that's true.
But at the same time, I shouldn't have to have like 6 layers, but I'm concerned that people in my building may be using space heaters and like safety issues around that. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's
So-
just, like, we never talk about FDR.
If you'd like, we can bring FDNY.
So and to answer your question, yes, there is a sort of DSNY portion, but it doesn't exist in the reso that I just showed you. There is actually a different reso, and let me show that to you right now. In fact, if you guys are up for it, we can send you both, and you guys can talk. You can pick it's the same process. You pick your most important issue, and then you sort of think about why it is the most important issue. The section of the report is called Core Infrastructure, City Services, and Resiliency. Now, as you can see, some of that is within the purview of this committee, and other elements like the resiliency part are in the purview of other committees. So that's the way the report is broken up. It does not align necessarily with the way we have broken up our committees. But we can send this to you guys as well when we send you the other one, and you do the exact same thing. You look at the choices here, and then you select which one you think is the most important. We're going to have to work out with the other committee if they have any strong feelings, because it'll be essentially 2 committees deciding which of these issues here are the most important. As you see, some of them are sanitation related. CB6's current pick for the most important issue in this section is cleanliness and trash collection. But let's say the health committee gets their hands on this and they think, no, it's like water supply.
Help here.
But you know, and in fact, there's a water supply adjacent issue at the land use committee that they're sort of trying to work out. So some of these things bleed together, and we're still working that out. This is the first year we're doing this report like this. But we'll send you both, and you guys can pick your selection, put down your thoughts, but certainly prioritize the one that is purely public safety. That's a good way to practice first, and then we can get on to this one.
Thanks, Jesus.
No
So for the
problem.
second time, the motion to adjourn.
Well, friends, it was
Has
very
been
appreciated.
made. And this meeting is adjourned at 20:33. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you all. Let me know when we're.
Those who don't do the assignment go to municipal health.
Brian, let me.
As long as I can bring my
when
day.
Broadcasting.
Is that in the East River?
Before you all go,